Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Another just request for you guys, if you're interested in doing so, please join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Be a part of our burgeoning group. We're having a great time passing along insider tidbits about BYU sports. The best part is just $5 a month to be a part of the group. You don't have to go to a website or a message board to get the inside intel. It comes to your phone in the form of a text message. So if you're interested in doing so, click the link in the show notes below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Sign up today. Get a 14-day free trial, 2 full weeks before you're charged anything. Once again, just $5 a month after that to be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right. Before we go on today's show, BYU football has really benefited, and this goes back decades at this point, from playing in LaVell Edwards Stadium. I don't know why it's taken so long, it feels like, for BYU to get the recognition it deserves for what LES offers to the BYU football program. We hear from BYU players all the time. There's nothing like walking out in that tunnel and hearing the crowd noise and obviously having the Cougar Nation, the faithful behind you when you're playing in Provo. But if for whatever reason, nationally, it doesn't ever resonate, it feels like, in terms of LES getting its plaudits as a true home field advantage for BYU. Well, that changed earlier this week with 24/7 Sports putting out an article talking about what they project to be the top 25 toughest stadium environments. So essentially home field advantage, the best home field advantages in college football. And there we go. LaVell Edwards Stadium featured prominently right at the top of the article. It says this: LaVell Edwards Stadium does not get enough national attention for being one of the toughest environments in college football. In the past 4 seasons, BYU's 4-1 at home against AP top 25 opponents, including that blowout win against Kansas State last season that set the tone for its breakout year in the Big 12, going 11-2. With all the returning production the Cougars have coming back for 2025, there was a ton of hype building in Provo. I expect another raucous crowd to give BYU a decisive home field edge in 2025. I like that because we talked yesterday how I feel like 2025 is very a big season for the Big 12 to inject itself into the national conversation and kind of stave off some of the it feels like the inevitable with regards to the Big 10 and the SEC being the dominant forces in the sport. And they very well may continue to be that, and they probably are going to be that. But the bigger thing is BYU needs to use its home field advantage to its advantage. BYU has got a really, really good thing going with LES. I have been one who has said that I'd like to see LES revamped, rebuilt at some point in the relatively near future. But for what it is, it's a really, really elite venue. And BYU fans, you out there listening to this podcast, you are a huge, huge reason why it's such a decided advantage. I had noted that 4-1 against AP top 25 teams over the past 4 seasons. BYU is getting results on their home field. And so long as they continue to do that, that is a major, major weapon to have in your back pocket. I know that it's hard to quantify what home field advantage does in college football. You can't say it adds this many points or it induces this type of situation. It's hard. Like I said, it's hard to quantify that. But everybody who pays attention to college football knows that when you're playing at home and you're having the home faithful behind you, it gives you that extra boost. And it can also intimidate opposing teams. I'll say it. I thought Kansas State got intimidated by BYU when BYU put on that run over the 8-minute span. The crowd was absolutely insane. I was sitting in the press box, and it was absolutely deafening, sitting behind glass up above the fray in LES. It was absolutely nutso. And I thought it rattled Avery Johnson. I thought it rattled the entire Wildcats football program. And they were out of it at that point. And it's happened to so many teams. I can remember as a kid, when I even growing up as a fan of BYU going to games and watching how opposing teams, when Cougar fans came to life in that stadium, the sound reverberates off the aluminum bleachers and it's deafening and it gets to guys. It has been something that BYU has used for decades to their advantage, and I'm appreciative that 24/7 Sports is finally recognizing what BYU has and what it needs to utilize in 2025. I mentioned it yesterday. I feel like BYU in 11-1 season is not out of the realm of possibility. Really, the only one loss that I look at right now is that back-to-back set when in terms of hosting Utah and having immediately to jet over to Ames, Iowa to face off against Iowa State. The ISU game feels like a scheduled loss in some ways for BYU. But beyond that, I expect BYU to handle their business on their home turf. And obviously, with Utah coming in with the stakes of BYU, it'll be more than 2,000 some odd days since Utah has notched a rivalry win and BYU's got a 2-0 run against them. You're going to want everything going in your favor that you can have. And having LES as raucous and as just, I don't know, thunderous, whatever adjective you want to use with regards to what LES offers to the BYU football program, it needs to deliver once again this year. I am looking forward to it. I have anticipation of hopefully buying a pair of tickets once again to give away to Cougar fans in our insider group, as we've done over the past few years, to get you out to these games. Because when you can watch LES on TV and you can get a feel for the hectic and the raucous nature of it, but there's nothing like being there, sitting in the stands, taking it all in and really feeling kind of the energy that pulses from Cougar Nation in that building. It is one of a kind. It's the most stone cold sober crowd in all of college football. It wasn't Keaton Slovis who said that a couple years ago when he was playing for Pitt after he had gotten beat by BYU in his playing for USC. But yeah, they may be sober, but they are rabid. They are vociferous. They are absolutely all in with the Cougars, speaking of BYU fans, when it comes to playing at LaVell Edwards Stadium. And it's going to be a big key. If BYU wants to make the type of run they want to make this coming season, you need to be undefeated at home. You cannot afford to have slip-ups. You can't have that Kansas game come and bite you in the rear end this year. That cannot happen. And BYU, I think, learned a tough lesson from letting things slip against Kansas. And yes, I understand there was some fluke stuff in that Kansas game. But the bigger point to be made here is you got to understand that you don't lose at LaVell's house. You may lose on the road here and there. That happens because, once again, when you go to opposing venues, they have their home faithful bearing down on you. But when you play in Provo, BYU expects and should expect to win every one of those games, regardless of the opponent. History suggests BYU will play against the best and perform at its best when it comes to playing at LaVell Edwards Stadium. And the history, you look back at the history, number 1 Miami in 1990. You can look at some of these great epic wins in BYU football history. Common thread amongst a bunch of them is the fact that they took place on the turf there in Provo. And this is cool to see this. And I'm hopeful that BYU will build on that legacy of having a strong home field advantage and make it a place that Big 12 teams come to fear. We also talked yesterday about BYU being the big dog. That was the quote that Rondo Fehlberg used. Well, if you want to be the big dog, you've got to be a place that teams just loathe, fear. They have no interest of going to Provo and expecting to win. That should be something you look at and say, man, we got to go to Provo. That's going to be an L on our docket. That's the way you've got to have opposing teams, fan bases, administrators, coaches thinking when it comes to LaVell Edwards Stadium. And I think what Kalani Sitake has been building with BYU football is doing just that. People don't enjoy playing at altitude, playing in the cold when it gets late in the season. And the fact that you have 63,000+ fans cheering you on, it's a really, really nice advantage to have in your back pocket. And BYU needs to utilize that to their advantage as much as possible in 2025. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. As always, thank you for your guys' support of the podcast. Truly means the world to me that you guys continue to surprise with the numbers of downloads, views, sharing, rating, reviewing, the number of subscribers we have seen. We're seeing some massive growth. So thank you for all the support. Please continue to support it. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, once again, thank you for being everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.